Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 254, Vettori vs. Dolidze 2, also known as UFC Vegas 104. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. It is, as of right now, not even 24 hours since we were doing the live recap for UFC 313, all the weirdness, controversy, but time marches on, and the UFC's back at the Apex this Saturday with a 13-fight card topped by one of those rematches that I don't think anybody was out there howling for, but we just fell into it. It's Vettori versus Dolidze. Give me your overall letter grade for this card on paper and tell me which individual bout on the card you are most looking forward to.
Yeah, when I think about the UFC, and we've talked about this before, we kind of have to put the events in different tiers. Like last night being a pay-per-view tier, I put that as like the second tier. The top tier is like the special pay-per-views, International Fight Week, New York City card, those type of like. Not often. And then you have like your house shows, and then you have your Apex cards. And so I try to compare them to Apex cards, and the standard of Apex cards just keeps getting lower and lower and lower. It's not good. This is a bad card, even for that standard. Like I give it like a C-.
We're almost to the point, because I completely agree with the tiers. I love that. Like the UFC's tentpole events, like there are 2 or 3 pay-per-views a year where they really pull out all the stops. Then the regular pay-per-views. Then even the fight night cards on the road, because they'll do a better card when they're in Austin for a fight night than when they're just at the Apex. Then the Apex cards. We almost need to put in a tier where Dana White's Contender Series is the tier right below these regular Apex cards, because they're getting awful close. This card has, I believe, 2 fighters, might be 3 fighters, who are in the UFC despite losing on the Contender Series. If you can lose on the Contender Series and still get into the UFC, then that line is starting to get blurred. Like, how much better is this card than a good Contender Series card? It's something, man. And I mean, having said that, I'll offer the usual disclaimer. Fights is better than no fights, and too many UFC cards, quote unquote, is a problem that you or I would have killed to have in like 1998. So like, I understand that this is a first world problem, and I'm complaining about something that on some level I should be grateful for, but nonetheless, I'm not going to pretend that all these cards are of equal merit. And this is a strange one, because not only does it have not as much divisional relevance at the top as you would hope for, it has a number of prospects, including a handful of undefeated prospects. But spoiler, I think there are a lot of prospects on this card that are not good at all. And
there's nobody there saying is a future top 10 guy.
No. And some of these rising prospects are in fights where we're not even going to learn much about them. There are 13 fights on this card. I don't know if this is a record for the modern era, but it's got to be close. 5 of the 13 fights on this card have a favorite of minus 500 or greater. This is like Bellator undercard slaughter. Because Bellator undercard, when they have their big events, it'll be a 6-fight main card, or it would be a 6-fight main card, and like a 10 or 15 fight undercard that just goes all day. And you'd have a bunch of local ticket sellers, and then you'd have like Tyrell Fortune versus like a 3 and 5 guy.
Ed Ruth versus
I was going to say Joey Davis, but Joey Davis sometimes loses to the guy that's plus 1,200. So, having said that, any overall thoughts on this one before we dive into these prelims?
No, I mean, it's just like what we talked about. Like, I love pizza. Like, I could eat pizza all the time. I'm up there, and I got to be in the top 1% of people who eat pizza on planet Earth. But even I will get sick of pizza every day. Like too much of a good thing is bad, and that's kind of how I feel like with UFC cards right now. Like,
oh, and if you had great pizza 2 nights ago, and then you're at the grocery store today and like Red Baron pizzas are on sale for like $1.99, you're not stocking up on it because you're like, oh, you know.
Yeah. That's actually a good way to compare. Like the Apex cards are your frozen pizza. Like you can't compare a frozen pizza to delivery. Not even DiGiorno, you know. So
DiGiorno is those road fight night cards, like UFC Charlotte, UFC Austin. Those are the DiGiornos. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to compare them to the other frozen pizza. So this is a frozen pizza card.
Outstanding. First up on the UFC Vegas 104 prelims is a women's flyweight matchup between Yuneisy Duben and Carli Judice. Duben, the 28-year-old Venezuelan, is 6-0 with 1 no contest overall. This will be her UFC debut. She fought on the Contender Series last September, pulling off the biggest upset in Contender Series history as she walked in as something like a plus 800 underdog and lamped Shannon Clark in 1 minute and 13 seconds. That was good enough to get her a ticket to the big octagon, where she will try to get her first actual UFC win against Judice, who is looking for the exact same thing. Judice, 26-year-old Louisiana native, is 3-2 overall. She's 0-1 in the UFC. After joining as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series, she fought on the Contender Series back in Season 7, actually lost on the Contender Series to Ernesta Carrascaite, got the call-up last June anyway, and dropped a split decision to Gabriela Fernandez. So across 2 separate visits and 2 separate octagons, she is 0-2. Looking for that first win. The good news for her is she is favored to get it, as she is one of those massive favorites I alluded to during the intro. Judice is minus 500, Duben plus 375. Keith, I'm just gonna put it this way: when you have a fighter that lost on the Contender Series, and lost in the UFC to a middling women's flyweight. To steal my partner's tagline here, Carli Judice should not be a 5-1 favorite over anybody in the UFC. If she is, then there is a problem either with the bookmakers or with the division. And I think this is a problem with...
It's not often the fighter on a 2-fight losing streak is the negative 500 favorite over the person who just got a spectacular knockout on the Contender Series.
Now, on some level, I understand that the UFC has painted itself into a corner there. We're going on like 5 straight seasons of the Contender Series now, where basically all of the winners and some of the losers get signed. So if you step up and you knock out a minus 1250 favorite in 1.5 minutes and just knock her dead stiff, they have to sign you. Like, it would be a ridiculous break from precedent not to, but I don't think either of these women is ready for prime time, and not even ready for prime time by the modest definition of prime time that includes this particular undercard. I'll say that I think Judice has a little bit more upside. She's a good-sized woman for the division. She is a pretty crisp boxer, but at this point, at her best, even in her wins, she's been kind of a medium output, low power kickboxer. Like, I do favor her to beat Duben because Duben's regional wins were over ultra low level competition. And that killer knockout aside, she looks barely able to defend herself on the feet. Barring another just wild collision where, she lands the perfect punch as they're both careening inward with their hands down, I think this is probably a nice bounce back and a nice first official octagon win for Carli Judice. Give me Judice to just touch up Duben for most of 3 rounds with better footwork, better reach. Obviously, after the knockout on the Contender Series, Duben's going to be looking to crash the pocket with a massive overhand like she did. I don't think she gets it. And I think Judice is probably smart and well coached enough to catch her on the way in if she keeps doing that, and just either like forcing the clinch, where I think Judice is naturally bigger and stronger and can kind of bully her there, or at least find safe harbor. Yeah, give me Judice by decision. But like I said, this is one of those fights that I don't think is going to tell us too much about either prospect.
Yeah, I despite her record, I think I am a little higher on Judice than most people would be. Looking at an 0-2 fighter, if you count, a contender series. Yeah. She's a long and lengthy fighter. She's a good athlete. She's a southpaw. I do like her striking. I mean, she's got incredible volume on the feet. She kind of just touches to those openings. She works behind a jab. She's throwing nonstop combinations. She loves her lead power hand. Like, she'll throw it a lot. Like, she's like this power left. Though she doesn't have, like, she lacks power. She's not a big, like, one-punch knockout person. She's got a big kicking game. She has an incredible high kick KO on her record. I like her stepping knees. She wants to be the one moving forward. She hated pressure. Her last two fights, it was the pressure that kind of got to her. She does have good footwork, though. She cuts angles really well to avoid shots. She can use her size well in the clinch. I haven't seen too much of her grappling offensively. Her defensive grappling, she's more of a sprawl and brawl kind of type fighter. Good cardio. I mean, she didn't stop in either one of her fights. Move over to Duben. I mean, she's a short and stocky fighter for the division. She's a thick woman. I said that I'm in the 1% in the pizza eating. She might be in my group. Like, she's
yeah.
She's got a taekwondo background. She's very aggressive on the feet, attacks with combinations, but she's so good.
No, I was gonna. She is aggressive, all right.
Yeah, she attacks with combinations. She's very wild, though. But she has power. I mean, she's got 5 TKOs. Her KO on the contender series was nasty. She also has this awesome high kick KO that she did on the regional scene. It was a high kick. She can overthrow her shots, though, which leaves her open to be countered. Her defense is bad. I mean, she pulls her head straight back to avoid shots. She eats a lot of shots. Because she's pulling her head straight back, her legs are still there, so she's getting kicked in the calves. I haven't seen too much of her ground game. I am shocked that Judice is this big of a favorite. I actually thought it might be based on the knockout and her record that she might came into this fight as the underdog. So tells you what I know. But that said, like, Duben definitely has the power, and Judice has got to avoid that. But technically, she's super raw. Judice, I think, just beats up from range. I think she uses her volume to batter Duben, use her footwork to avoid the big shots. Give me Judice by decision.
Next up on the UFC Vegas 104 prelims is a women's bantamweight matchup between Josiane Nunes and Priscila Cachoeira. Nunes, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 10-3 overall. She's 3-2 in the UFC. She's 1-2 under featherweight. Despite the fact she is barely over 5 feet tall, she came to the UFC as a featherweight. Once that division kind of disappeared, she did drop down to 135 pounds, and she is 1-2 below featherweight. She's on a 2-fight losing streak, those being a unanimous decision loss to Chelsea Chandler last March, in which Chandler missed the bantamweight limit, and then a split decision loss to Jacqueline Cavalcanti last August at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Bahalio. So Nunes looking to snap the first losing streak of her career. She is going to try to get it done against Cachoeira, who is working on a streak of her own. 36-year-old Brazilian is 12-6 overall. She is 4-6 in the UFC. She's 0-1 at bantamweight. She was brought to the UFC originally as a flyweight sacrificial lamb for Valentina Shevchenko. She lost her first 3 fights in the UFC, then found some footing in the promotion, winning 4 of her next 5, even if the one loss is one that should have gotten her booted immediately from the UFC, one of the dirtier performances in the last few years. But she has regressed to the mean at this point, having lost her last 2 fights. That would be an armbar submission at the hands of Miranda Maverick back in July of 2023. And then in her lone appearance of 2024, last January, she got tapped out by Jasmine Jasudavicius in a bantamweight matchup. That was at UFC 297. So she's working on a 2-fight losing streak of her own. She is not favored to snap that streak, as Nunes is minus 200, Cachoeira plus 170. It is kind of funny that the one who is moving up in weight here is like 5 inches taller. But nonetheless, Nunes is the favorite. Do you see it that way, Keith? Who gets it done? Is this an everybody leaves town fight? Like, tell me what we got here.
I mean, but being taller than Nunes is not that big deal. I mean, Hasbulla was taller than Nunes, so I love Nunes, and like Cachoeira, I don't mind her moving up. I do want to start with the way I always start, and it's been a long time ago, but I put this in my notes and I said I was never gonna take him out. I just want to point out that Cachoeira still shouldn't be in the UFC after she was eye gouging Jillian Robinson like nonstop and just wouldn't let go and like tried making her blind. It's still one of the dirtiest things I've ever seen. On the feet, she's an action fighter. She marches down her foes. She gets in the pocket. She's looking for big shots. She throws a lot of hard hooks. She can get very wild. Sometimes she just kind of tends to duck her head and throw. She does have good power, and I think her power will move with her up. She has KO wins over like Shayna Dobson, Gina Mazzani, Ariana Lipsky. But despite having the power, she has, bad technique. Like she's very similar to Duben, who we just talked about, and that she's raw. Now, technically, compared to her, she looks like freaking Floyd Mayweather out there with the striking. But you get my point. She has a lot of big defensive issues. She keeps her hands really high. She'll drop her hands. She keep her chin high. She will look for takedowns, but I definitely would not call her a wrestler. If she gets a fight down, though, she's a pretty good topside grappler. But though she's a terrible defensive wrestler and terrible get-up game. And she has taken a beat, and she's kind of like too tough for her own good. I mean, I talk about, you think about that legendary beatdown she got against Valentina Shevchenko, but like Jasmine Jasudavicius just beat her up too. Miranda Maverick beat her up pretty bad. So, but then she gets thrown into another action fighter against Nunes, who's a southpaw. She's a pressure striker. She likes to get in the pocket and throw hard shots. When she gets inside, she has to get inside. You mentioned it's because she's really short. When she gets inside, or she's throwing bombs. She has creative ways to kind of close the distance. One of her favorite is throwing Superman punches. It's like a quick way to close the gap. Lately, she's been throwing the same looping overhand left over and over again, which I hope she kind of mixes in more shots. She does have power. She kind of dips her head when she throws punches, kind of leaving her open to be kneed up the middle. She showed power against Bay Malecki, and I mean she has 8 TKOs in her career. Despite my throat's bothering me. I get a little bit of a cold. She does well to get inside the clinch and use like her shortness to her advantage. Like she can grind in the clinch, use good head position. She's got some strong, dirty boxing. She never really looks to wrestle offensively, and she's a weak defensive wrestler who really needs to improve her get-up game. What I do like, and I think she does it too much, but she gets taken down. She starts looking for like elbows off her back, so she'll do damage off her back, but she needs to like land something and try to get back up. If she ends up on top though in a scramble, she's got some good ground and pound. So you never asked, you asked me, and I never answered what my favorite fight on the card is. I considered this one. I'm not picking this one. I probably would have went with Gibson and Blackshear, but this is definitely one that I would consider. I think both fighters will have their moments. I am going with our girl Nunes. I think she wins the striking battle. I think she hits harder. I think she can win the clinch battle. I think we have a war. I think it's going to be actually a fun fight. But I think Cachoeira loses again. Give me Nunes by decision.
I won't bother reiterating everything you threw out there because I agree with basically all of it. This is a fight that's probably going to be entertaining specifically because these women lack striking defense and don't always have the best fight IQ. Like, I think that's just going to make for a wild fight. The fact that both of them probably know that there's a chance they get cut if they lose is going to add to that. So yeah, I think Nunes comes out ahead in a slugfest, and I could see her actually putting a lot of strikes on Cachoeira, but Cachoeira has proven to be just the fact that she has still never lost via knockout or TKO, given some of the beatings she's taken, is something. Like, you know, the Shevchenko fight right off the gate told us, if nothing else, she is too tough for her own good. So yeah, give me Nunes to win this one clearly, probably land more damage on Cachoeira than she takes herself, but not be able to get the finish and just have to settle for getting back on track with a well-deserved decision. The UFC Fight Night 254 prelims soldier on with a third straight fight featuring a debuting fighter. This one is up in the light heavyweight division as Diyar Nurgozhay makes his debut against Brendson Ribeiro. Nurgozhay, the 27-year-old from Kazakhstan, is a perfect 10-0 as a professional. He won on the Contender Series last October, knocking out Bartosz Shevchik in the second round. He will look to stay undefeated and pick up his first official UFC win at the expense of Ribeiro. 28-year-old Brazilian is 16-7 with one no contest overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. After the Contender Series, he was brought in as basically a sacrificial lamb for Zhang Mingyang at UFC. I don't remember whether it was Macau or it was in China. Anyway, got knocked out in China by the Chinese guy, then dropped a majority decision to Magomed Gajazulov last June before finally getting his first UFC win last November with a split decision over Caio Machado at UFC Fight Night Moreno versus Albazi. He will look to even up his UFC record at 500. He is not favored to do so, as the newcomer is minus 300. Ribeiro is plus 250 coming back. Nurgozhay is an interesting guy. Like, he's not you look at him in terms of like his body type and the repertoire of techniques he throws, there's not much similarity, but in kind of what he does to the pace and the feel of the fights he's in reminds me a little bit of what we saw out of Magomed Ankalaev just last night in the headliner of UFC 313, where he is.
That's it. Ben said that he's a future champion right there.
Future champ right
there. Gotta beat Alex Bajeda. You said it.
Like, obviously, the body type is not the same. You know, Ankalaev is a huge guy with a huge frame and reach. Nurgozhay is much more of like a compact, burly guy. But just in terms of,
he looks like a guy sitting at a hotel resort having some cocktails, sitting by the pool. Like, not in bad shape, but not ready to fight shape either.
And win or lose, we may be talking at some point about whether he'd be best served moving down to 185 pounds. But when I watch him fight, I see a kickboxer that throws a good repertoire of strikes, tends to be pretty technically sound, but is conservative in his approach. Like, he just seems concerned with not overextending himself, not exposing himself defensively. If his opponent is coming at him and forcing the issue, he will knock him the hell out, kind of like Magomed Ankalaev does when he fights somebody with lacking striking defense that keeps coming at him. But if not, he's perfectly happy to sit and take a straightforward decision over a fighter that he outclasses. That makes for an interesting matchup with Ribeiro, who has been, I mean, I don't want to call him live by the sword, die by the sword, since 2 of his 3 UFC fights have gone to decision, but he fights like he expects all of his fights to end in a knockout one way or the other. Like, he's a guy that is sometimes losing a fight until he explodes and lands something and wins, or when he takes on somebody that is able to take advantage of his defensive lapses, it goes ugly quickly, like it did against Zhang Mingyang. Because of that, I think this could be either a very frustrating fight or a very entertaining fight, just depending on which of these guys can make the fight in his image, in the image of what he prefers. I'm going to go with the newcomer here. I don't know if I'm minus 300 comfortable picking him against somebody that hits as hard as Ribeiro does and is as aggressive and gives himself as many chances to put that power on his opponent's chin as he does. Like, if I were a betting man, I would not be touching Nurgozhay at minus 300. But again, just I think this fight, it's going to look like Ribeiro kind of behind, like a half step behind for most of the fight. And if he's able to explode and land something big, maybe he wins that round. Maybe he wins the entire fight if he hits him hard enough. But if he doesn't, it's going to be one of those just kind of hanging on the edge of your seat fights where Nurgozhay is just keeping Ribeiro just enough at bay, and Ribeiro never gets like just that one massive head kick or massive haymaker that turns the whole fight on its head. So give me Nurgozhay by decision here, but I do have healthy respect for the possibility of the upset.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by the line there. Ribeiro, I mean, he's shown some well-rounded skills. I mean, he's so big. I mean, he's got this incredible 81-inch reach. He likes to work from distance, though he has struggled to kind of cut off the cage when he's trying to strike. We talked about that his last fight. He's a bit unorthodox and a little wild. He throws way too many single strikes. But to his credit, he can land from a mile away. When he can get dragged into a brawl when he really should be a distance kickboxing or kind of point fighter. He throws a lot of looping punches. He does throw a lot of kicks mixed in with his punches, which I like. He has big power. I mean, look at the guy. The guy's huge. He's got 9 TKOs. He's got a great high kick. He really likes teep kicks and good calf kicks, though he is heavy on his front foot. So he's open to leg kicks. Defensively, he's got some issues. He keeps his chin really high in the air. He's been knocked down in the past. He will wrestle a little bit, but I don't think he's very good at it. If he gets on top, he has mean ground pound. He has 6 subs on his record. He's a weak defensive wrestler, and he makes it worse because he jumps guillotine and kind of struggles to get off his back. His cardio has been inconsistent. He's gassed in the past, but against Kai Machado in his last fight, it was much better. Nurgozhay, apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. I kept getting distracted because he kept doing this like weird face wipe thing constantly that he does. It's really weird and distracting. He's a southpaw, a little flat-footed. He is a little low output striker. He throws too many single strikes. He's a counter striker. He's got good head movement. He likes to slip and rip. Great overhand left. He looks for uppercuts inside. He's got good power. He really steps into his shots. He's got 6 TKOs. He throws hard calf kicks, hard kicks to the body. He had an incredible high kick KO in his Contender Series fight. Because of he's heavy on his front foot, he's open to calf kicks himself. He will sneak in the takedown, but I like very similar to Vera. I think his wrestling is grossly overrated. He's more of a guy like catch a kick and get him down that way than shooting from distance. But he is hard to take down if Ribeiro tries to get takedowns. He has 2 submission wins on his record. I like the raw ability of Ribeiro when he first came to the UFC, but I kind of think I'm out on him. I see some things in the newcomer that I like, but overall, nothing really jumps out at me. But I like that he understands range and gets inside and he can land some big shots. I think Vera might slow down, and I think Nurgozhay might put him out, landing some shots. I don't think it's going to be like some spectacular knockout, but I'm going to be like a cumulative thing that eventually Vera can take it. Give me Nurgozhay to win by second round TKO.
Men's flyweights take the cage next at UFC Fight Night 254 as Daniel Barez and Andre Lima face off. Barez, the 36-year-old Spaniard by way of Mexico, is 17-6 overall. He's 1-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He actually lost on the Contender Series, went back and won 4 straight fights in Mexico before getting the call up. He debuted in the UFC back in July of 2023, getting tapped out by Jafel Filho in the first round. He came back last September at UFC Fight Night Moicano versus Saint Denis and picked up a unanimous decision over Victor Altamirano for his first UFC win. He will look to make it 2 in a row at the expense of Lima. 26-year-old Brazilian is a perfect 10-0 as a professional. He is a perfect 3-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of the Contender Series. After his infamous disqualification win in his UFC debut almost exactly a year ago, he has rattled off decision wins over Mitch Raposo and Felipe dos Santos in his other 2 appearances of 2024. The most recent of those, the Dos Santos fight, was at UFC Fight Night Burns versus Brady in September. So he'll look to make it 4 straight to open his octagon career, certify himself one of the more intriguing up-and-coming prospects in the men's flyweight division. And he is favored to do so, as he is minus 300, Barez plus 250 coming back. Keith, gonna flip this one to you. Andre Lima is now 10-0 as a professional. He's 3-0 in the UFC. He hasn't really fought anyone good yet. How good is this guy, and are we going to find much out about that on Saturday?
I think he's really good. I think there's a lot of things I like about him. I think if we said there's probably nobody on the card that is, future top 10 guy other than the main event guys. I probably corrected myself. Like Lima he's the one guy that I would be like, oh, this is a guy that's promising because he's so young. So I like him a lot. He's big for the weight class. On the feet, he's a high output striker, very relaxed and poised. He's got this kickboxing style. He does well to pressure and kind of cut off escapes for the enemies, which is very very technical thing to do at a young age. He's a pressure boxer. He wants to be one moving forward. He did struggle with the pressure of Igor Severino, who I don't think is a bad fighter at all. I mean, he's kind of dumb, but so I think that's actually a pretty good guy that he beat. And I know the circumstances were strange, but he's an accurate striker. He loves his overhand right. He has plus power. And that's because he sits on his punches. He's got a big kicking game, good leg kicks from both stances, both southpaw and orthodox. He checks leg kicks, which is a rare thing you see, especially for a young fighter. He will back straight up to the cage if you pressure him, which was something I hope that he would fix. He's a good wrestler, though, strong, gets the fight to the ground. He's got a strong top game, works to better position on the ground. He's got mean ground and pound. Not the best defensive wrestler, but he's shown the ability to be hard to hold down. He hasn't subbed anybody yet, but he is a BJJ brown belt, so take that for what it's worth. Whereas, I mean, it's hard to really get excited for a 36-year-old, especially at flyweight. On the feet, he's a good boxer. Like, he sets up his shots well with feints. He works behind a good jab, does work the body. He has nice power. He's got 7 TKOs. I go back to like the Victor Altamirano fight. He dropped him multiple times in that fight. He throws hard calf kicks. He avoids strikes by backing straight up. He isn't much of an offense wrestler, but if he gets the fight to the ground, he is a submission threat. He's got 6 subs, although he was quickly subbed by Fiello in his UFC debut. Again, it's hard to get excited for Barez, being that he's 36-year-old flyweight. But he's a tough test. I think this is an appropriate test. I like Lima everywhere here. I think he's a better striker. I think he's the better wrestler. I think he's obviously has the higher upside. He's at the age where he can really show improvement. I think he dominates the entire fight. I think we get a very decisive, one-sided affair. I don't think he gets a stoppage, but I think he wins all 3 rounds. Give me Lima by decision.
Yeah, and you jumped right out and mentioned the thing that I really wanted to underscore the most, which is you look at Lima, kind of a tall, lanky, angular guy for the division. You look at his record where half of his wins are by knockout or TKO. You see that he's got 0 subs, and it kind of belies the fact that he is actually pretty clearly capable of taking care of himself on the ground. He hasn't been called on to do it too much in his UFC run so far, but you look back at his regional footage, he has been kind of easy to take down, but at least he doesn't just, lay flat on the mat and concede the position. When he was taken down in Brazil, he clearly had a sense of urgency to get back up and start beating the guy up again. I am quietly high on this guy. Getting bitten in his UFC debut may turn out to have been the best possible thing to happen to him. Like it made him memorable. It's what I still think of every time he comes up. Oh, hey, this guy again. This is great. I see it about like you do. Like Barez is not a bad fighter, but a 36-year-old flyweight against one that just barely turned 26, and just the specifics of the matchup seem to favor Lima. If Barez really sells out to get the takedown and can walk through a few punches and kicks and get Lima on the ground, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I think he might have trouble with that. I think Lima's takedown defense might look better than it has historically in this fight, just because I think he's going to be quite a bit quicker than Barez. Barez might just have trouble finding his hips if he wants to get this thing to the ground. So I'm with you here. Give me Lima by one-sided decision. And yeah, outside of the main event, this is probably the guy on the card that's most likely to be a future top 10 fighter. We head to the strawweight division next as Stephanie Luciano squares off against Sam Hughes. Luciano, the 25-year-old Brazilian, is 6-1-1 overall. She is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. She actually fought to a draw on the Contender Series with Talita Alencar. The UFC responded by signing both women. In a rematch, almost a year later, Luciano came out ahead in that one. That is her lone octagon appearance since the Contender Series. So she will look to make it 2 in a row here against Hughes. Hughes, 32-year-old Iowan by way of Texas, is 9-6 overall. She is 4-5 since joining the UFC out of LFA, and she has alternated wins and losses in her last 5 fights, dating back almost 3 full years at this point. She's coming in off a win. She picked up a split decision over Victoria Dudikova last August at UFC on ABC, Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov. That allowed her to bounce back from her only other appearance of last year, where she dropped a decision to Yasmin Jauregui back in February. Odds on this one favor Luciano pretty heavily. She's minus 250, Hughes plus 210 coming back. There are 2 women in the UFC right now whose nickname is Ronda or something Ronda related. Stephanie Luciano is Hondinha, Little Ronda, and then we've got that Russian chick that calls herself the Russian Ronda. Neither of them fight anything like Ronda Rousey, for better or for worse. I don't get that. And
it must be a different Ronda.
Yeah, I guess they never specified that part.
Maybe it's that Ronda that what is it, the Four Seasons thing about? Help me, Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda. I don't know. I don't know. That's the word.
I think that's the Beach Boys.
Oh, that's all right. Beach Boys. All right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Who do you like better, the Beach Boys or the Four Seasons?
Oh, got to be the Beach Boys.
They're both pretty good, though.
They are pretty good, but
I'm gonna go with the Beach Boys too.
I mean, we're already going to get called such boomers in the.
This is the ultimate boomer right here. This is even before our time.
Yeah. Just for this 40-second discussion, we're going to get called all kinds of old.
How about this? Who wins in a fight? The Beach Boys versus Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. That's a good battle.
That's a battle like around the pickleball courts at the retirement home, because any of those dudes that are still alive are in their 70s, if not 80s. Man, do you remember?
I don't know. Frankie Valli. They were like they were the Jersey boys from the streets.
Yeah, but Frankie Valli was also like 5'2". Like maybe the rest of the Four Seasons were bigger dudes.
And the Beach Boy, one of the Beach Boy guys, was running with what's his name? The Helter Skelter people.
No, Charles Manson.
Yeah, I was running with Charles Manson and those guys. You know that, right?
I don't know if I knew that actually.
Oh yeah. This is not like Shillan making up on the spot. I can't remember one of the guys. Charles Manson like lived with them.
Oh, good grief!
They were like hanging out at his house and shit. And you know what? You convinced me. It's the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys win. But it's true. Look it up. It's true.
I will look it up.
It's crazy. Like
Beach
Charles
Boys
Manson, like,
win. Now I'm going to try to convince you that Sam Hughes is going to win this fight.
Okay, go with it. Who would be the Frankie Valli and who would be the Beach Boys in this one?
Oh man. Actually, Sam Hughes would probably be more of the Frankie Valli type. She's more of like the gritty, like, you know, blue collar, tough. Like she's from Davenport, Iowa.
Yeah, Luciano probably has like the beaches where she's from and stuff. Yeah.
Like, and Davenport apparently wasn't ugly enough for her, so she moved to Dallas. You know,
I love Dallas.
No, I love Dallas too, but
Dallas is fantastic.
You better like some big blocky concrete buildings if you're gonna get
you know what, I like Fort Worth. I it's a Dallas trip, so that's why. Anyways, carry on.
Here's the thing, Sam Hughes has improved in her time in the UFC. She's just, I mean, she lost her first 3 fights in the UFC. There was every possibility she would get cut after those first 3 fights, but she sort of figured out what she's good at and has gotten good at. Like the skills aren't exactly the same, but it's almost like an American Molly McCann, where she is just, her skills are basically the same as they were. She is probably physically a little more fit than she was early on. I mean, at this point, it's like 5 years or so of training full time, fighting at the UFC level, being at a big camp. You know, so she's probably a little stronger and has a little better cardio, but she's basically the same fighter she was in 2020. But she's gotten better at turning her fights into grindy fights where she, at her best, can kind of not let quicker, more fleet of foot strikers really get rolling against her. She is physically strong for 115 and has used that to bully her opponents where possible. Like her wins over the last couple of years are all over people that I think are probably at least as good as Luciano. People like Jackie Amarim, Elise Reed. Luciano, for somebody whose nickname is Ronda, just isn't much of a bully physically. Like when I think of Ronda Rousey in MMA, I think of just everything kind of like at her good, like the good Ronda Rousey. Everything ran off the fact that between her judo background and her athleticism and just brute physical strength, anyone that she got her hands on went flying. And she would also just, you know, like when she melted Sarah McMahon with a knee to the gut. Like Luciano doesn't really have that going on. But I think when she and Hughes get their hands on each other, Hughes is actually going to be the stronger woman. Yeah, I can't believe Hughes is greater than a 2-1 underdog here. I just don't see it. This is one where and I think I said this within the last couple weeks. If a fight feels like it should be a pick'em to me and somebody's a greater than 2-1 favorite, there's 2 things I can do. I can either assume that I'm missing something and go with the bookmakers and the bets that drive them, or just go, all right, if it feels like an even fight to me, then I'm picking the underdog just on general principle, because, you know, sometimes it's me that sees what everyone else doesn't. Give me Sam Hughes to turn this into a Sam Hughes fight, win 2 rounds out of 3, and just never let Luciano get anything going that she wants to. I picture, at least in the rounds that Hughes wins, 80% of the round takes place outside of the warning, like between the warning track and the fence.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. Like I think this should be a pick'em. And I think Hughes has always been a little underrated. I mean, she's a boxer. She's got great output on the feet. She has some fast hands, and she's made a lot of improvements since she first came around the UFC. I mean, this girl's she gets around, you know. She works behind the jab. She cuts angles well to set up her cross. She uses her good footwork. She throws kicks with her combinations well. She's a builder. Her volume increases the deeper the fight goes. She can sneak in a takedown, though I don't think she's very good at it. If she gets a takedown, I mean, she did get takedowns against Elise Reed and Estela Nunes. She likes to work in the clinch and kind of get the takedowns from there instead of shoot from distance. she's mostly upper body takedowns. She's a bad defensive wrestler, though. She was taken down 4 times against Piero Rodriguez. She was also taken down by Luma Lubomi. But she's shown an improvement. She's starting to be hard to hold down. If she ends up on top, she doesn't have the best control, though she does have 3 submission wins. But she was submitted by Vanessa Demopoulos. The thing I like about Luciano is, excuse me, she's only 25 years old, so things are kind of treading in the right direction at that age. It kind of gives you the good vibrations. She's a long range striker. She's got some quick hands. She's accurate. Nice straight shots down the pipe. Throws combinations,
just like Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She throws combinations. She's got good variety in her striking. She works the body well. She likes teep kicks. She doesn't look to offensive wrestle much. Her takedown defense looked bad in the past, but it was improved against Talita Alencar in the second fight. I'm with you, man. I think the line is way off. I think it's simply because I think Hughes she came into the UFC kind of like a terrible fighter, but she's improved. Though on the flip side, Luciano kind of has that big gap in age. She's faster, I think, on the feet. But I agree with you. I don't think she's that strong. I think both are going to have their moments. I want to give the speed and athleticism to Luciano, but I almost want to give the strength and obviously the experience to Hughes. God only knows who's going to win this fight. I think we got a consensus upset pick. I'm going to go with Hughes. I think she's got the better of the moments. I think we get a split decision. I think it's a go for Hughes. So give me Hughes by split decision.
Up next on the UFC Vegas 104 prelims is the lone heavyweight fight on the card, unless Fatherhood really, really agrees with Roman Dolidze. It is Waldo Cortes-Acosta welcoming Ryan Spann to the next division up. Cortes-Acosta, the 33-year-old Panamanian by way of Arizona, is 12-1 overall. He's 5-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series, and he is on a 3-fight win streak since his lone career loss. He dropped a unanimous decision to Marcos Rogerio de Lima just a little under 2 years ago. Since then, he has wins over Lucas Dresky, Andrei Arlovsky, and Robelis Despain. The most recent of those, the Despain fight, was last May at UFC on ESPN, Lewis versus Nascimento. So Cortes-Acosta will look to make it 4 in a row, and frankly, the heavyweight division being what it is, kind of certify himself a fringe contender in this division. In order to do so, he's going to have to get past the man who calls himself Superman. Spann, 33-year-old Texan, is 22-10 overall. He is 8-5 since joining the UFC as a 2-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost on season 1, came back on season 2, got signed, and as I say, since then, 8-5, and he is coming in off a win. He guillotined Ovin St. Preux in just 90 seconds at UFC 307 last October. That allowed him to snap a 3-fight losing streak, the first losing streak of any kind in the UFC for him. He'll look to make it 2 wins in a row and get an auspicious start in his new division. He is not favored to do so, but the line is fairly close as Cortes-Acosta is minus 170, Spann plus 140. Keith, it's funny. Like, Ryan Spann, I feel as though 13 fights into his UFC run, and given what we saw out of him in LFA, never say never. There's plenty of time for a, 33-year-old now heavyweight to reinvent himself. But at least the fighter Spann is now, the book is written. He is a guy with uncoachable physical matchup problems. He is absolutely gigantic. He is shockingly mobile and fluid for a guy as big as he is. He's incredibly strong, despite the fact that he presents as a kickboxer and certainly has numbing power when he lands on people. His best weapon is, of all things, just a fast and nasty guillotine. And he's a guy that continually finds ways to lose fights he should win. Like Spann, I won't say every time, like, because as long as Anthony Smith is on two functioning legs, I think a guy like Anthony Smith is always going to find a way to beat the Ryan Spanns of the world. But in a lot of other fights, Spann is right there until all the wheels fall off. And either he gets caught by a guy with massive power like Bogdan Guskov, or things don't go his way, like when Johnny Walker elbowed him in the back of the head literally 12 or 15 times in a row. He's a guy that had a long route if he was ever going to win his way to contention at light heavyweight, just because of the people he'd lost to and the streak of losses. I actually like him moving up to heavyweight. And for a guy that has a propensity for getting caught and hurt or just flat out knocked out, like, I wouldn't think that it would be a good move to move up to where everybody has even more power. But paradoxically, I think you'll run into that problem less often at heavyweight, just because there are fewer fighters at heavyweight that throw in combination and throw as wide a variety of strikes and are as fast as the people that have really caught Spann at light heavyweight. I think the funny thing is, even though Spann is coming to a new division after having had a decidedly mixed time at light heavyweight, and meanwhile Cortes-Acosta has won 3 straight, favored to win his 4th straight, I think Spann has higher upside in the heavyweight division. Like, if Cortes-Acosta wins this one, he's probably going to get a top 15 type opponent in his next fight. But if one of these guys is in the title, I don't think either of these guys is in the title picture 3 years from now, but if one of them is, I think it's more likely Spann.
Yeah, agreed.
Here, though, the good news for Spann is Cortes-Acosta isn't the kind of guy that will seriously punish him for one defensive lapse. He's not Johnny Walker. He's not Bogdan Guskov. He's not Nikita Krylov. Like, Cortes-Acosta's best weapon is his jab. He's one of the few heavyweights that has that good a reach and actually employs it by having a decent jab and using it a lot. If we get a bad Spann, I think he gets jabbed up and looks kind of inert and lost against Cortes-Acosta for 3 rounds, and by the end of it, they both look pretty tired. If we get good Spann, I think he keeps Cortes-Acosta from getting in a rhythm, makes it a little messy, and either just does his tall man thing and just slaps a guillotine from the clinch against the fence. He's still tall enough to do that to people at heavyweight, or hurts Cortes-Acosta with like a big punch or a head kick or something and pancakes a shot and guillotines him. I hate picking Ryan Spann fights. I'm wrong all the time. And if you're wrong picking a Ryan Spann fight, you look extra stupid afterwards. So at full risk of looking extra stupid, give me Ryan Spann to make a successful debut in his new division. And if he wins, I don't think it's going to decision. Give me Spann by second round submission here. I think it'll be an awkward and tentative looking first round. I could see Spann having trouble getting untracked as Acosta just kind of plods forward and keeps snapping the jab out. But yeah, like I say, Cortes-Acosta is going to slow a little bit. They're both going to be a little more tired in the second round. That means footwork slows down, defense gets sloppier, hands don't come back as quick. But again, I think that probably hurts Cortes-Acosta more than it does Spann. Give me Spann to hurt Cortes-Acosta sometime in the second round, grab a front headlock in traffic, clap on that guillotine, and celebrate. Spann by second round submission.
I like Spann moving up to heavyweight. I really think that that's the right move. And I like that he did it not when he was like, oh, he lost a whole bunch of fights in a row. Like, he's actually coming off a win, before he, it wasn't a super desperate move. But I think he'll do well there. We know he won't be undersized. He's 6'5". I'm sure he'll put some more size in that frame. He's one of those guys, when you saw him in person, it was like, well, how does he make light heavyweight to begin with? He's a long.
Question for you. On Friday at weigh-ins day, Spann over or under 245 pounds?
I think that's like you pick like the perfect mark.
I tried to make it hard.
Yeah, I'll go under. I'll go like 240. Okay. But he's gonna be right there.
Yeah.
But he's a long and lengthy striker. He's a pretty technical striker, though he does need to improve his output a little bit. Maybe not cutting the weight down so much, might improve it a little bit, and also just being a light heavyweight. Obviously, that fights at a higher pace than heavyweights usually do. He throws straight shots on the pipe. He has good power, and I think that will go up with him at heavyweight. I mean, I always go back to him knocking out Dominic Reyes with a jab. Again, I think at that time it's more about Reyes, but still, he will throw some big looping left hands. He's also very good at beating his opponent at the point of contact. I think he'll be faster at heavyweight. Defense is an issue, though. He's always been very hittable. He doesn't move his head enough. Well, I talked about all this about his striking. I've said this about Spann before. He has this Alistair Overeem thing going where everyone thinks of him as a striker, but really he's better on the ground than he is striking. He's got 11 submission wins, which is pretty incredible. He's got an incredible
He's up to 13 now, actually.
Oh, yeah. 13. Yeah, I got to update my notes. So there you go. Yeah. Usually I at least double check those. I mean, he subbed Iwan Cutelaba with the guillotine. He just subbed over in St. Preux in his last match with it. Sub defense isn't the best, though. He was subbed by Anthony Smith, and that's a fight that hasn't aged well. Move over to the Costa. He's a boxer on the feet. He's a volume striker for a heavyweight. He works behind a jab. He sets up his power shots with feints. He throws clean straight shots down the pipe. Though at times he can get away from being technical and look for the one big blow. We saw that against Andrzej Arlovski, and it's what cost him the fight. He lost that fight, right?
Wait, which one for
Arlovski?
No, he beat Arlovski by decision.
Was it much? I think it was much closer than it should have been.
Yeah,
that's what I should have. I apologize. When tactical, he's pretty good.
It was the most boring fight of all time.
Yeah, he's good at because Arlovski does that, especially at the end of his career. He's good at wrapping his punches around his opponent's defense. He works the body well. He has some pop in his shots, but he's definitely not a one punch ending fight guy. Compared to heavyweights, he's heavy on his front foot, so he's open to leg kicks. Defensively, he keeps his chin high in the air. He did show a hell of a chin, though, against Robles Despain. Despain was hitting him with some good shots, and he didn't go down. He also showed good fight IQ by wrestling Despain, something that Cortes-Acosta is not really known for. He's a bad defense wrestler. I always go back to this, Chase Sherman taking him down, and he struggles to get back up. We got two consensus on the dog picks. I like Spann here. I think he takes Cortes-Acosta down. Once it goes down, I think he subs him. I think he subs him quick. Give me Spann. I'm taking Spann by first round submission. Honestly, I was very surprised that he was the underdog in this. I thought he'd be the 2-1 favorite. I'm super confident pick. You know how confident I am? Ben, lock it up. I'm betting the house on it. This is my lock of the night. I like Spann. You said don't ever you don't like picking Spann fights because you said he can lose when he should win. Well, I'm doing the opposite. I'm going all in on him.
All right.
House. I like Spann by sub. You know what? I'm taking Spann. Lock that up. And if you want, we're not a betting show. I don't know what Spann by sub is, but I'd throw a play on that too. Give me Spann by sub too. I'm gonna say Spann by first round submission.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night 254 prelims is a men's bantamweight matchup between Carlos Vera and the debuting Josias Musasa. Vera, the 37-year-old Ecuadorian, is 11-4 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as a standout in Fury Fighting Championship. He made his debut just a little over a year ago at UFC 298, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Rinya Nakamura. He will look to get his first UFC win here against the debuting Musasa. 26-year-old Congolese fighter is a perfect 8-0 as a professional. He fought on the Contender Series last September, picking up a split decision over Otari Tanzalovi. Odds: Musasa is not the biggest favorite on the card, but he is right up there as he is minus 650, Vera plus 450 coming back. So obviously, tape study is a big part of this job, and paradoxically, compared to what, you might think as a listener, the smaller, less notable cards are the ones that involve the most tape study. Like if Justin Gaethje, Derek Lewis, Angela Hill is fighting, I'm going to watch their last fight to make sure I remember it properly, but I've got my notes. When you've got a card with 10 fighters that have either 1 or 0 fights in the UFC, there's a lot of tape study. Josias Musasa got some tape study out of me today. For one, it is taking all of my self-control not to make jokes. I mean, his name is Musasa. I want to make Lion King jokes all day long. Here's the thing. When you're a young prospect and you get on to Dana White's Contender Series, or you get called straight up to the UFC for whatever reason, it's always going to be an open question how good that fighter actually is. And it comes down to watching their regional footage. Whom did they beat and how? Like, there are some fighters that look like $1 million fighting regionally, and it's just because they're fighting terrible fighters that just literally don't know how to defend themselves. And once they get up to even middling UFC level competition, either they just turn out never to have been that good, or they lose a couple fights early on. It takes some regrouping, maybe a change of camps, change in approach before they're able to merge into traffic. I don't know what his ultimate upside is. Josias Musasa has some definite tools in the tool chest for a UFC level bantamweight. He's a good size. He's athletic. He definitely hits hard. He is aggressive. At least on his way up, he's given himself every chance to leverage his physical gifts into getting his hand raised at the end of the night. But having said that, by everything he's done on his way up, this guy is not ready for prime time. A lot of his fights in Africa took place in AKO, African Knockout. African Knockout is a newish promotion that it's not completely owned, but what's his name?
What is it called? African Knockouts?
It's called African Knockout, AKO. And
is that the calendar I bought you for Christmas?
It's what's his Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman is their poster boy. Like, he's a part owner, producer. It's him leveraging his fame as a fighter, his fame in Africa as a second generation Nigerian immigrant, but the quality of the fights themselves are ultra low. And looking at some of he's fighting people that, like, he looks like an amateur mixed martial artist with some upside, and he's fighting people that look like they're from like a West Virginia tough man competition, or just throwing down in a Waffle House parking lot. Just people that come in like head down, eyes closed, swinging wildly at him. The people he's fought, especially up before the Contender Series, are so bad. We're talking about people that like fell down like over swinging on a punch, and he just sort of jumped on and landed and mountain punched him out a few seconds later. Musasa's own ground game is unproven, and to the extent that it's proven, it looks kind of iffy. If Vera lands in top position on this guy, I think he wins, and he pulls off one of the biggest upsets you'll see all year this year. Like, they chose well. Vera is a grappling specialist who is 37 years old and not much of an athlete even when he was younger. He is a modern day reboot of like a Hani Yahya type, only without Hani Yahya's like multiple world championships in jiu-jitsu. Like, this should be the perfect guy to just go running at Musasa, trying to get him down by any way possible, and running straight into a flying knee or a massive uppercut or something. But there is huge upset potential here. Like, yeah, Vera got dominated by Rinya Nakamura, but Rinya Nakamura would destroy Musasa. Rinya Nakamura was like an unfair test for someone like Vera in his UFC debut. I understand why Musasa is the favorite. The most likely outcome here is that Vera comes forward, knows he needs to get this fight to the ground, and Musasa catches him with something nasty, knocks him out in the first round, and it's a fast win with enough of a highlight reel finish that it covers up the still obvious deficiencies in Musasa's game. Like when I said off the top that a lot of your undefeated prospects on this card and a lot of your up-and-comers are in matchups where even if they win, we're just not going to learn much about them. That's this fight. But I think the upset potential for Vera here is much greater than the line would make it seem. I'm not a betting man, but the other shoe is going to drop for Musasa quickly here. Like I say, he's just not that good right now. Screw it. I'm picking what is probably the biggest upset I will pick with a straight face in 2025. Give me 37-year-old Carlos Vera, who was probably the second or third best bantamweight in Fury Fighting Championship, to hand Josias Musasa his first career loss. I'm going to say he gets it done by second round submission. And I expect Vera will get rung up a bit in the first round. My prediction is we find out in the second round that Musasa's gas tank is not great and that his takedown defense is not great either. Vera manages to drag him down, softens him up a little bit, moves to mount. Musasa gives him his back. We get a rear naked choke. Massive upset.
Wow. Can you feel the love tonight for Carlos Vera? Nice job, Ben. Wow, this is exciting. I'm excited now for this one. I mean, Carlos Vera, I mean, he's 36 years old, so I think it's safe to say that he's on the end of the circle of life. He's a southpaw. He uses a lot of movement. He likes to kind of stick and move. He's a very wide open stance, Taekwondo style, throws a lot of kicks, throws some spinning attacks, some body kicks, throws some hard body kicks. He does that like Holly Holm push kick. He wants to get to the fight to the ground, but he isn't a very good wrestler. He's this like old school BJJ guy that he'll pull guard to get it down. Like he's a guy you can tell he spent a lot of time in the BJJ room, learning from the Gracies, or now up in the stars looking down on us. But that doesn't really work in modern MMA. That style. Now, he's got weak takedown defense. He struggles to get up from the bottom. He has no urgency to get up from the bottom. He likes playing like the guard game. He does have 5 submission wins. He looks for like ankle locks from the ground. Move over to Josias Musasa. We have a completely. I like this kid. I like what I've seen, especially the Contender Series matchup. I mean, he's young, he's raw. He's gonna have to probably wait a little bit to be king, but he's a southpaw. He's an action fighter. He likes to press the action. He's got fast hands, explosive. He throws, straight shots down the pipe. Though sometimes he can overthrow his shots, which leave him open to be countered or to be taken down, which would be the best avenue for Vera. I like that he works the body well. He's got 7 TKOs. He doesn't really look to wrestle, and he's a weak defense wrestler, but he showed the Contender Series matchup. He's got a good get-up game. He has no subs on his record, and I'd really be surprised to see a get-up sub here. And there was a lot of question marks about his cardio, but against the Contender Series matchup, he didn't slow down, and he was coming on hard. So Vera's going to want to get this fight to the ground. But I think if he gets it down, I think he's got a hard time holding Musasa down. The guy that Musasa fought on the Contender Series kept trying to take him down, and he was popping right back up. I think Musasa is going to be too fast for him. I think we see this completely. I think he's going to smash Vera. I think he's going to land big shots. I think he's going to early. I don't know if the Lion will sleep tonight, but I think Vera's sleeping tonight. Give me Musasa by first round knockout. But Ben, if you're right or wrong, Hakuna Matata anyways.
Hey, no worries for the rest of my days if I lay down some money on Vera and it pays out, right?
There you go.
I need to
Be
get
prepared.
I need to get this out. Like, I think I compared him to like Hani Yahya or somebody, while leaving the most obvious comparison. He's a Ryan Hall student. He's totally
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
the next coming of Ryan Hall. Yeah, like hook kick, flop to the ground, wait to see if the guy jumps into your guard, get back up. Yeah, that's his takedown game. We stay in the men's bantamweight division as Su Young Yu and AJ Cunningham take the cage. Yu, the 29-year-old South Korean, is... Yes.
You? Are you?
Oh, this is going to turn into a who's on first.
Me?
And
who?
Oh.
You, me?
Oh, I got it. All right. Timestamp if you need to skip this part, folks. Yu, 14-3 with 2 no contests overall. He is officially 1-0 in the UFC. That is, of course, after having won 2 fights on the Road to UFC Season 3 series. But his official debut was last November at UFC Macau, where he picked up a unanimous decision over Judice Bergang. He will look for his second official UFC win at the expense of Cunningham. 30-year-old Arkansan is 11-4 overall. 0-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost on the Contender Series, went and won one more fight in the Midwest, got the call up on short notice to fight Ludovic Klein. That went about as well as you would expect. Klein put him away with a body kick in the first round. So he is down at his better weight class and looking for his first UFC win. He is not favored to get it, to say the least. On a card full of obscenely wide lines, Yu is the biggest favorite on the entire night, as he is minus 700, Cunningham plus 500.
Wow.
Keith, I'm going to flip this one to you first. The jokes really do write themselves. I'm not trying to tee them up for you, but tell me how good you think Su Young Yu is, and are we going to learn much about him against Cunningham?
I think we already did the who's on first jokes last time this guy fought. I mean, I don't see why he's a 700 favorite. I mean, I think it might say more about Cunningham than it says about you. Cunningham, I mean, he's moving, right? This is at featherweight, right?
It is, I believe it's a bantamweight, but let me check that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I would rather be right about this.
I thought he was.
It's a bantamweight.
Oh, bantamweight. I'm sorry. Okay.
So Cunningham, it's interesting for Cunningham because he got called up on short notice to fight Klein. Klein's normally a featherweight, but they met at 155 pounds. Like, I want to say Cunningham weighed in at like 154 or something. But now he's going to be all the way back down to,
He moved down 2 weight classes, which is, I mean, he's a big dude. He's an aggressive striker on the feet, nice volume. Though he lacks power, kind of throws a lot of arm punches, throws a lot of kicks, hard kicks. He's very like defensive weak. Like, he just chin high in the air. He's very hittable. You got to worry about his durability. He's been stopped in 2 of his last 2 fights, but even how he was stopped, he was hit with some big shots. Kind of one of these guys too tough for his own good. Not much of an offensive wrestler, but if he gets the fight to the ground, he does have 4 subs. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but if he does have a good get-up game if you take him down. And I should have mentioned this about Cunningham. Like, if you watch his Contender Series fight, they talk about his like backstory about like being abused his whole life. So it's kind of a really sad story. But move over to Su Young Yu. He's a short, compact fighter. Kind of fights out of both stances. Good movement. A lot of L stepping. They kind of fight, counter on different angles. He likes to throw down in the pocket. He's got some pop in his hands. He lands a lot because he can wrestle. And so he lands strikes because his takedown attempts open up opportunities for his striking. I'd say he's a good wrestler, and he wrestles a lot. He had an incredible throw on the road to the UFC. He is a submission threat. He's got 5 subs on his record, but he does need to improve his overall ground control. I don't understand the odds. I'm not high on Cunningham. I really don't see a UFC talent, but I'm not that high on you, or this fighter that's fighting Cunningham either. Especially like -700. I look at him as I think he's a UFC talent, but I see him as a very low end UFC talent. Like I don't get why he's such this like I don't see him as this like hot prospect. I do think he gets some takedowns. I think that'll help him get a decision. I think he'll land the hardest shots on the feet because Cunningham has defensive issues and he's so aggressive that he can kind of walk into shots. I'll say you wins by decision.
Yeah, I was, needless to say, surprised at the line as well because, okay, Cunningham probably doesn't belong in the UFC, and if he belongs in the UFC, is probably not at 135. I know he fought at 135 like real early in his career, but his appearance on the Contender Series was at featherweight. Again, his fight with Ludovic Klein was at lightweight. He's a tall guy with a big frame. It'll be interesting to see how he looks on the scale, how he looks walking into the cage. I'm mildly intrigued by Su Young Yu. For a guy whose nickname is Jiu-Jitsu and who obviously thinks the ground is his...
Okay, I didn't realize that was his nickname. Okay, he should be a -800 favorite for that nickname. Nice job, my man.
He's definitely a very persistent wrestler. He uses it a lot. I think his entries are actually probably the least impressive part of his offensive wrestling game. Like he has good trips and ways to finish takedowns from the clinch. You mentioned he had a great throw on one of the Road to UFC bouts. But yeah, like just actually dropping levels and shooting a double or a single from outside usually doesn't lead to much for him, except for maybe a safer way to get into the clinch where he can really get his takedown game going. And as you mentioned, it does seem to open things up for him in the striking. I don't see him as a future contender necessarily, though he's 29. He might really take off now, but here I do think he's going to be able to get Cunningham down. And considering this one's at bantamweight, I'm kind of concerned about Cunningham's cardio and durability, whereas Su Young Yu has shown at the very least he's capable of taking a wrestling heavy approach for 15 straight minutes, no problem, because he's done it in all three of his UFC fights. Give me Su Young Yu to establish superiority right away, like get takedowns on Cunningham, but I don't think Cunningham's going to be able to hang for 15 minutes like Yu's last couple of opponents have. Cunningham doesn't currently have any losses by submission. I think we're getting one here. Give me Su Young Yu by third round submission. Third round finish via ground and pound wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility either, but I'm saying he whips out the old Jiu-Jitsu on a tired and fading Cunningham and gives us the mercy tap in round 3. Lightweights are up next at UFC Vegas 104 as Alexander Hernandez and Kurt Holobaugh face off. Hernandez, the 32-year-old Texan, is 15-8 overall. He is 7-7 in the UFC, a run that has taken place almost entirely at lightweight. He had a brief experiment at featherweight that did not especially go his way. He's coming in off a win. He fought most recently at UFC 307 last October, where he picked up a split decision over Austin Hubbard. That snapped a 2-fight losing streak for him and potentially saved his job. He will look to pick up some momentum, go above 500 in the UFC at the expense of Holobaugh, who is fighting his way towards 500. 38-year-old Louisiana native is 21-8 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-5 across 3 separate stints in the UFC, which sounds terrible and is terrible, but it's worth noting that he's 2-1 this most recent time. He joined the UFC first over a decade ago as part of the absorption of Strikeforce, then rejoined the UFC in 2017 or so out of season 1 of Dana White's Contender Series. He was cut both of those times without picking up a single win. He finally rejoined the UFC a year and a half ago as the lightweight winner of season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter. Since then, he's 2-1, with the finals win over Austin Hubbard, a loss to Trey Ogden, and in his most recent appearance last July, a unanimous decision win over Kenan Khrushchevsky. That was at UFC on ESPN, Lemos versus Jandiroba. So Holubov making the best of his third opportunity in the octagon will look to string together back-to-back wins for the first time ever. He is not favored to do so, but this is one of the closer lines on the card, as Hernandez is only minus 180, Holubov plus 150 coming back. Keith, I'm flipping this to you, but it feels like a perennial underachiever in Hernandez versus a guy in Holubov that, as he pushes 40, just finally seems to be leveling up into an actual UFC level fighter. Who survives and advances here?
I was hoping you could say that. I was hoping you say that 2-5 was an overachiever, but this fight, it's so funny because there's a lot of fights that I'm not interested in on the card. This is like right up there. Not based on how they will fight, because I mean, Halbar is always going to bring a fight, so he's never boring. It's just, we know who these guys are. I mean, I'm believing the Halbar turnaround a little bit, but I think it's more that he was always better than his record suggests. But I don't expect him to go on a run. And Hernandez, yeah, he's got a win in his last fight, and he definitely looked better. I mean, he's a good boxer. He's got some quick hands. He's accurate. He's very good at measuring his opponent. He's got a great left hook. We saw that in his last fight. He attacks with combinations really well. He mixes punches to the body and the head together in combination. He does well to dart in and out of range. He does well to mix punches and kicks together in his combinations. He doesn't really check leg kicks. I mean, we saw Damian Jackson chop up his leg. He will occasionally take the fight to the ground, and he's a decent grappler. I mean, he's good at winning scrambles. He's been wrestling a little bit more lately. He's a weak defensive wrestler, though. Cardio has been inconsistent, but it looked much better in his last fight. And I think some of that's just going back up to lightweight. Going down to featherweight was a disaster. Halabar, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's a high-volume striker. He likes to get in the pocket and throw down, constantly attacking combinations. He's got nice 1-2s down the pipe. I like his body work. He has plus power. Defensively, he pillars, which I hate. He also rolls with punches. He keeps his chin high in the air. He's a guy who's willing to eat a shot to land some of his own, and Hernandez can hit. Not bad at closing the distance and wearing on his opponent in the clinch. He's a very physically strong person. I met him in person. He's big for the weight class. He isn't much of an offensive wrestler, but he's a good grappler. Definitely like more your traditional BJJ guy. He's got 10 subs. He looks for subs off his back. He has a bad defensive wrestler, though, with a weak get-up game. He shows no urgency to get off his back. He has no issues trying to, like, throw up subs for off his back. But he has good cardio. Like, he's going to be in this fight the whole time. I think the line should be even closer. This is a tough one. Holibau's volume alone just gives him a much better chance than those odds say. But his lack of wrestling is a major issue. But you mentioned, like, Hernandez is so inconsistent and kind of an underachiever. There's a clear avenue of victory for Hernandez, and that's to start wrestling and take Halibut down and hold him down for long periods of times. I think both guys are going to have their moments, but I think the power striking of Hernandez with the wrestling, it gives Hernandez a very narrow win. But I locked up Spann as my most confident pick. This is my least confident pick. Give me Hernandez by split decision.
Yeah, I'm with you in that I see this one playing out closer than it needs to be, closer than it should be. Hernandez is, like, it's easy to call him an underachiever just because, again, he debuted in the UFC just lamping Beneil Dariush in 40 seconds. When you do that, you're announcing yourself as a guy with top 10 upside. And since then, he has been constantly just on the verge of losing his UFC job. But the physical gifts, man, it's just like he is faster and more explosive and stronger than everyone he fights. And it just doesn't matter. Like, yeah, he's younger than Hollabaugh. He is a much harder hitter than Hollabaugh. He's faster, physically stronger, But you could say the same thing about the last 3 people to beat Hernandez: Damon Jackson, Bill Algeo, and Billy Quarantillo. Like, you put those 3 and Kurt Hollabaugh in a decathlon, and everyone's coming in last. Like, Hernandez, I hate leaning primarily on the intangibles, but you did such a good job breaking down their respective skill sets that I'll just jump straight to that. It's a guy in Hollabaugh that is finding ways to win against a guy in Hernandez that still finds ways to lose whenever possible. Because of that, in a fight that seems close on paper, I'm going to lean with the slight upset here. I know I'm going upset crazy. Like, if it's a disastrous night, maybe I'll just call in sick for the recap and not come take my medicine. But
dude, have you seen this card? I might too.
Give me Hollabaugh to win 2 rounds out of 3. Normally, Hernandez fights are exciting, win or lose. I could see this being one of the slower, more measured ones. You're right in that Hernandez's best route to victory, aside from just punching Hollabaugh really hard in 40 seconds, would be to wrestle and just trust Hollabaugh's tendency to concede the bottom position and lose rounds that way. You know, Hollabaugh has something of that 2007, mid-card fighter to him. But I don't trust Alexander Hernandez to take the obvious route to victory necessarily. Just makes things harder on himself than they need to be. Give me Hollabaugh. I'm going to say it's a splitter. Give me Hollabaugh by split decision in a fight where at least two of the 3 rounds are like a coin flip. Next up on the UFC Vegas 104 main card is a men's bantamweight matchup between Damon Blackshear and Cody Gibson. Blackshear, the 30-year-old North Carolina native, is 15-7-1 overall. He's 3-3-1 in the UFC, and he's coming in off a win. He tapped out Cody Stamann in the first round at UFC Fight Night's Magny versus Prates last November. That finish allowed him to snap a 2-fight losing streak against Mario Bautista and Montel Jackson, so he's going to look for his second straight win here. He will have to get past Gibson in order to do so. Gibson, 37-year-old Californian, though he did apparently pick up stakes and relocate his training to Las Vegas for however long this second UFC experiment runs. He is 21-10 overall. He is 3-5 across 2 separate stints in the UFC. He is 2-2 since rejoining this most recent time as the runner-up of Tough 31. The bantamweight runner-up. He fought in the Tough 31 final back in August of 2023, dropping a unanimous decision to Brad Katona. Since then, he has a loss to Miles Johns and then 2 straight wins over Brian Kelleher and Chad Anheliger. So Gibson looking to move towards 500 in the UFC overall, looking to go above 500 in this most recent run. He is not favored to do so, to say the least, as Blackshear is another massive favorite. He's minus 500, Gibson plus 375. We just finished talking about Alexander Hernandez versus Kurt Hollabaugh. Here is another fight between a guy that is 500 in the UFC, despite being at least as skilled and more physically gifted than basically all of his opponents, against a fighter on a repeat chance in the UFC who seems to be finding his footing even as he pushes 40. Like, the parallels are there to be seen. I'm not going back-to-back insane upset picks. Like, I'm not doing that here, but I certainly see the upset potential for Gibson, because I tell you what this fight's probably going to look like. It's going to look like Blackshear losing until he wins. Like, Blackshear has some difficult to prepare for physical challenges that he presents. Like, he's a very big bantamweight and very big in the sense of just having a huge wingspan, being tall and rangy. And in the striking, I feel as though he knows that he has a reach advantage and a speed advantage on a lot of his opponents and tries to fight and outfight. Like, I think in his mind, the perfect Damon Blackshear fight is one where he's winning an outside kickboxing battle until his opponent gets frustrated, gets reckless charging in, and then Blackshear either hits a reactive takedown or like slaps on a guillotine as they shoot or something, or, pancakes a takedown, spins around and slaps a twister on him. Like I think that's in his head the perfect Damon Blackshear fight, and it is the perfect Damon Blackshear fight for his body type and his skills, but he has thus far struggled to do it against the good fighters he's faced. Like, he's not inconsistent like Hernandez, where Hernandez has beaten some very good fighters and then lost to just some okay ones. With Blackshear, it's a pretty clean break where he's beaten the okay fighters and he's lost to the good ones. Because of that, I'm not going for the massive upset with Gibson here. But I know exactly what Gibson's going to do, and he is going to take the fight to Blackshear, and I think he's going to make Blackshear uncomfortable. I think this is going to be a fight where Blackshear is losing rounds and looks like he's losing the fight until he uncorks something big. He either lands a big shot on the feet that starts things rolling downhill, or Gibson tries to wrestle him and he underestimates just how fast and fluid Blackshear is on the ground, and all of a sudden Gibson finds Blackshear in full back mount on him, like slapping on a choke. Give me Blackshear by, I'm going to say he gets it done via third round submission here, but he's behind on the cards at the time he does it. And it's just another Damon Blackshear performance where he looks like he has incredible upside and he's just a little frustrating to take in.
Then I think the line is way off of this. So we're kind of in agreement there. I think this is one of the best fights on the card. Gibson has looked good since he's come back in the UFC. I mean, he's a tough dude, and Blackshear, yeah, I agree with what you said about his record, but he's also fought, he's had a tough road, who he's fought so far in the UFC. Gibson, he's a minus athlete, but he just makes up by just being a pressure fighter. I mean, he's got insane output. I just go back to that Brad Katona fight because I was there in person, and the guy just was eating shots and just kept coming. I think he broke his orbital bone in that fight and kept fighting hard. He throws a lot of straight shots on the pipe. He has, I'd say, stinging power, though he can overthrow his shots. Despite having range on his opponents, he loves to get inside and brawl. He kind of just he keeps ducking and dipping to avoid strikes. He doesn't react well to strikes, though. I don't think he gets hurt that much. He doesn't understand the optics. He overreacts to the punches sometimes, which I don't think help him win decisions. He's got a big kicking game though. He can wrestle, and he wrestles a lot, and he's pretty good at it. He's got a good top game. He's got good cardio to go the entire fight. Blackshear, he's a really good athlete. He fights behind a high guard defense. He's got high volume of the feet, kind of just touches, and then when there's an opening, he explodes. He can be a little wild, and he gets wide and staying inside tight with those long arms. He will throw out some spinning attacks and stuff. He crushed Cody Stamann with a flying switch knee. He's got a big kicking game. He loves teep kicks. He loves hard calf kicks. He's a good wrestler, good at creating scrambles and winning it. Got some slick back takes. He's a big submission artist. I think he has 10 or 11 subs on his record. He does need to improve his takedown defense, but if he's taken down, he's pretty slick off his back. He'll play BJJ instead of getting back to his feet, which could be an issue against an underrated wrestler in Gibson. I like this matchup. I think I'm higher on Blackshear than you are. I think he's pretty underrated. I think both guys are underrated. I think both guys are fairly well-rounded. Gibson has the volume, but I'm still – I think the line is off, but I'm still leaning towards Blackshear. I think he'll actually land the takedowns. I think he wins the scrambles. And I see him locking in a submission. I see Blackshear catching Gibson. Give me Blackshear by second round sub.
Third from the top at UFC Vegas 104 is a featherweight matchup between Seungwoo Choi and Kevin Vallejos. Choi, the 32-year-old South Korean, is 11-7 overall. He's 4-6 in the UFC, has lost 4 of his last 5, and is coming in off a loss. He fought just once in 2024. It was in July at UFC on ESPN, Lemos versus Jandiroba, where he got knocked out in about 90 seconds by Steve Garcia. Prior to that, he had a decision win over Jarno Ahrens that snapped a 3-fight losing streak for him. So Choi, definitely mired in a pretty rough run here, is going to try to get things turned around against Vallejos. 23-year-old Argentinian is 14-1 overall. He is making his UFC debut here. He is a 2-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on season 7 back in September of 2023, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Jean Silva. That is still Vallejos' only professional loss. It is one that has aged well, to say the least, as Silva is yet another rising export of the fighting nerds. But Vallejos got a second chance on the Contender Series this past September, knocked out Cam Teague in about half a round to punch his ticket to the big octagon, where he makes his debut here, and perhaps unsurprisingly, is yet another massive favorite at UFC Vegas 104. Vallejos is minus 500, Choi out there around plus 370 or plus 375 as your underdog. Keith, how good do you think Kevin Vallejos is? Should we be excited about this guy joining the division? And is he going to get a chance to show it against Sung Woo Choi on Saturday?
I think you should be excited. I think he's a really good one. He looked spectacular in his last fight in the Contender Series. Again, he fought a very low level guy, and Choi, Choi's a veteran. He's been around the UFC for a while, so I don't like the line because of UFC jitters. You're making your debut. It's tough to be that big of a favorite against a guy who's been in the UFC for a while. And Choi has had moments where he's looked really good. I mean, he's a long and lengthy striker. He's a counter-striking kickboxer. He's pretty accurate on the feet. He does leave himself to be countered by loading up on his left hand a lot, and he throws a left hand without a lot of setups. He fights in spurts. He'll wait and then burst into the pocket and throw some hard shots. A lot of long-distance striking. Offensively, his striking isn't bad. The issue is he takes a lot of damage and he has major durability issues. I mean, he's been knocked out a lot in the UFC. He's got a good kicking game, especially the calf kicks. He's big for the weight class. He uses his size well in the clinch. He's got some solid dirty boxing, lands knees and elbows inside. He's not a great offensive wrestler, but he can sneak in a takedown. If taken down, he's hard to hold down. And if he ends up on top, he's got those long arms. He's got some good ground and pound. Now, Vallejos, the best thing I like about him is he's only 23 years old, and his boxing is clean. He fights behind the high guard defense. Everything's like tight inside boxing. He's got fast hands, accurate. He does a lot of hard, tight, short hooks. I love his little short, I don't even want to call it a overhand right. It's kind of like a dip-in right hand that he throws. He throws it hard. He does great work. I mean, in the Contender Series, he crushed his opponent to the body. He really steps into his shots. He's got good power. He's got 10 KOs already in his career, and he's not even in his power years yet. I like his teep kicks. I like his hard calf kicks. Again, and I feel like I've been saying this a lot. Not a wrestler, but he will sneak in a takedown. He's got 2 subs on his record. If the moment isn't too big for him, and being in the apex might actually help him. I mean, he's already fought there before, but also, not having the big crowd, I think steals a little bit of jitters away. Vallejos is the more skilled fighter. I'm all about him here. I mean, he looked great in his last fight. He's at the age where he can continue to improve. He hits hard, and Choi has durability issues. I think Vallejos pieces him up on the feet. I think he hurts him to the body. I think he finishes some big shots. I think he puts him out early. Give me Vallejos by first round TKO.
Yeah, I can't find anything to disagree with there. You pointed out something that I wanted to bring up, and that's that Choi still looks good in moments, even during this miserable run he's been on. It's not the same as, I mean, I said this about Andrea Lee just a couple weeks ago, where it's not just that she's been in a terrible slump, but just has shown so few signs of life in the fights as she's losing. You could say the same about Sam Alvey in that terrible run that preceded his exit from the UFC.
Yeah.
Whereas on the flip side, as horrible as it was for Tony Ferguson at the end, in most of those fights, he was winning until everything fell apart. I feel similarly about Choi. Just he's another one of those few remaining throwback old school South Korean fighters. And with that approach, once the durability is gone, it gets ugly fast. And that's kind of where he's at. And yeah, as hittable as he is, as aggressive as he is, as much as he can be gotten to the body, he's tailor-made for Vallejos to really, really shine against. And Like in hindsight, Vallejos' fight on the Contender Series with Jean Silva, even though that's his only professional loss at this point, you can make the argument that it's his best performance so far. Like, that was a close competitive fight. I thought he won the first round, and I thought Silva righteously won the second and third, but they were both competitive. Like, and knowing he was probably behind, he was trying to step on the gas at the end of that fight, which is another good sign. Like, not just, you know, kind of conceding and taking, you know, the safe loss. Yeah, like, given what we now know about Jean Silva, that's a hell of a performance. Here, I can't think of any reason to pick differently than you did. Choi's style involves him coming forward against a shorter but faster, harder hitting guy that throws in combination, tons of power, will go to the body. I think Vallejos is just going to start chewing him up promptly. Give me Vallejos by first round TKO as well. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 254, a welterweight matchup between Chidi Njokuani and Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos. Njokuani, the 36-year-old Nigerian-American by way of Las Vegas, is 24-10 with one no contest overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC out of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series and every other mixed martial arts promotion to exist in the entire world. He is on a 2-fight win streak since moving down from 185 to 170 pounds. He fought twice last year, picking up a split decision over Reese McKee in March and a unanimous decision over Jared Gooden in October. He will look to add another chapter to his improbable octagon story with a third straight win at the expense of the man they call Eliseu Cachoeira. Zaleski dos Santos, 38-year-old Brazilian, 25-8-1 overall. He is 11-4-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Jungle Fight welterweight champ. He is on, well, he's not on any kind of streak at all, but he did win his last time out, knocking out Zach Scroggin in about 1 minute and 10 seconds at UFC Fight Night Magny versus Prates in November. That allowed him to bounce back from his decision loss to Randy Brown at UFC 302 last June. This is one of the closer lines on the card, relatively speaking, but Eliseu Cachoeira is minus 180 and Njokuani plus 150 coming back. This is about as irrelevant as they get for a co-main event, even in the Apex era, even in the 42, 43 cards per year UFC era. I mean, if you're talking about relevance, and if you're a regular viewer of the show, you know that kind of my yardstick for that is, well, the UFC exists to figure out who the best fighter is. And we figure that out through title fights. So how close are these people to a title fight? Like, you know, sometimes I'll ask Keith right off the bat, who on this card is closest to a title shot if they win? If that's our measuring stick, this might be the least relevant co-main event of all of 2025 that wasn't forced that way due to injury. It is a 36-year-old and 38-year-old veteran, neither of whom is on any particular kind of positive streak, and both of whom have shown a hard ceiling against the top 15, top 20 of the division. Having said that, it should be a hell of a lot of fun. It's two guys that don't go to the ground unless it's the other fighter's idea, even if maybe Njokuani should consider doing so more often. It should be a lot of fun. It's, you know, kind of like when they would throw one of these guys in against, you know, someone like Muslim Salikov. Just, oh, hey, good kickboxy fun. Chidi Njokuani, I owe him and his handlers an apology, because about this time last year, I was like, why in the hell is this guy dropping to 170 pounds? He already wasted a ton of his career, clearly killing himself to make welterweight. At this point, you know, he's on the back end of his 30s. He's never going to be a contender in the UFC. He's big even for a middleweight. Why not just fight at a comfortable weight class? But then, yeah, he went on to snap his losing streak and win 2 in a row at 170. So what do I know? Having said that, neither Reese McKee nor Jared Gooden, one, are even still in the UFC, and two, are even remotely close to what Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos brings. Like, I know that Easy dos Santos is pushing 40. I mean, he'll turn 39 this fall, but he's another one of those guys that his athleticism might be slipping incrementally, but he is still faster and more explosive than a lot of his opponents that are a decade younger than him. He still hits like a truck. Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos has never been a contender in the UFC, but at this point he might get 20 fights in the octagon before he's done, and he's been a little bit of an unsung action hero in that same kind of range that's given us the Nico Prices and Vicente Luques of the world. Between these two guys, I think for one, despite the fact that both of them can absolutely land a kill shot, I don't see this one. I don't see either of these guys finishing the other. So to me, it comes down to who's better at winning rounds at this point in their respective development. And for me, despite the fact that he's the slightly older guy, it's still Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos. And Njokuani can still sometimes suffer from too low of output. And Zaleski dos Santos, I mean, he's going to come forward. Neither of these guys is a defensive wizard, but I think dos Santos is a little bit more sound defensively, reacts better when he is hit. So give me Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos to win 2 rounds out of 3 in a fun kickboxing bout that the booth will probably way oversell us and call it like a barn burner and an absolute war, mostly so they can justify its placement second from the top on this fight night. It'll be a good fight that will probably win fight of the night, whether it deserves it or not. And give me dos Santos to pick up the win by decision.
Yeah, dude, I second everything you said about co-main event. And dude, if they were looking to book, one of these guys in a title fight, I always do like how many phone calls do I make before I get you? Sean Shelby's freaking phone broke by the time he gets to these guys. But I mean, I feel like for both guys, we know what they are at this point. Dos Santos, I mean, he's a plus athlete that can fight out of both stances. He's got high volume on the feet, nice zipping his shots. He's a quality boxer. He loves his teep kicks. He can overextend at times, leaving him open to be countered. He'll throw out some weird capoeira stuff. He'll throw some flying knees. You got to worry about his chin as he's taken so much damage over the years. And he has a style that he's willing to throw down and brawl in the pocket. And it's not the best strategy because he's not a bad grappler. Offensively, he's an underrated wrestler. He got 4 takedowns against Randy Brown. He's always been a weak defensive wrestler, though. I mean, it's his Achilles heel. He did show he's shown some improved takedowns against certain people like Renat Fakhretdinov, but then other times he looks terrible in taken down. He is a BJJ grappler, so he can catch a sub or something, and he's got good cardio. Chidi Njokuani, obviously, he's a long and lengthy striker, really long arms and legs. He's a very good striker, especially from distance. He hated the pressure from Michelle Osajek, so that's how you kind of crowd him. He can't do his thing, but when he's from distance, he's relaxed, he's poised. Sometimes he can be too relaxed and too low output. He'll give, I don't want to see rounds away, but he'll give big moments away by just cruising. One thing I like about it, he switches stances in mid combination. He has good power. If he gets in the pocket, he looks for elbows inside. He loves stepping knees. He's got a huge kicking game, hard calf kicks. He does well in the clinch where he's the one grinding on his opponent using his size. I mean, he go back to the Jared Gordon fight. He beat up Jared Gordon in the clinch. He will look for takedowns. He is a BJJ black belt. Take that for what it's worth. He almost caught Dusko Todorovic in an anaconda choke. He's a bad defensive wrestler, but he did stop takedowns from Reese McKee. Again, I think this price is more about Reese McKee than the takedown defense of Chidi. If taken down, he struggles to get back to his feet. And I've said this before about him. He might be a front runner. He seemed to mentally break against Michelle Osajek. It'd be really smart. It might be really smart for either guy to go for takedowns and turn this into a wrestling match. I still think like Dos Santos probably has the advantage there, but I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna go with an upset. And you picked a lot of upsets tonight, and I don't know if I picked as many as you had, but I'm not that far behind. I think Chidi's gonna use his long range weapons. I think he can do enough on the feet to keep it on the feet. I think if we get some clinch battles, I actually think his size, he can do well in there to win those clinch battles. I agree. I don't think we're gonna see a stoppage. Just give me Chidi by decision.
With that, we arrive at the main event of UFC Fight Night 254, a middleweight rematch between veteran contenders Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze. Vettori, the 31-year-old Italian, by way now of Florida, is 19-7-1 overall. He's 9-5-1 in the UFC and has alternated wins and losses in his last 6 fights, going back 4 full years at this point. He's coming in off a loss. He dropped a unanimous decision to Jared Cannonier in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 47. That's not great news, and the other not great news is that fight was almost 2 years ago. It was all the way back in June of 2023. Vettori has been on the shelf ever since with a variety of injuries. His last fight before that, almost exactly 2 years ago, was against Dolidze, where he picked up a unanimous decision at UFC 286. He'll look to get back in the win column and go to 2-0 against Dolidze. Dolidze, 36-year-old Georgian by way of Las Vegas, is 14-3 overall. He's 8-3 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He is 2-1 since the Vettori fight. He lost his next fight to Nasruddin Imavov, but after that, he rattled off back-to-back wins over Anthony Smith and Kevin Holland. The most recent of those, the Holland fight, was at UFC 307 back in October, and it was stopped by Holland's corner seconds after the first round. Odds on this one? Perhaps not too surprising given the competitive nature of their first fight and the shelf time for Vettori, but the Italian remains a slight favorite, but he is minus 145, Dolidze plus 120, actually the closest line on the entire card. Wow. Keith, let me know what you think of this fight. It's a rematch of a competitive fight, but like the first fight wasn't an insane barn burner. They did what they could, for this card, but tell me who you think wins, and I guess we'll save the rest of it for the recap. But we after somebody wins, then we can talk about a path to the top 5 or to the title picture. Just tell me who you think wins.
Yeah, this is such a weird matchup in the sense that it's a rematch we saw not that long ago that nobody really remembers that match. And I don't think anybody was asking for that. If I'm being honest, you kind of have 4 middleweights right now, all in the same range. When you think about, I know it hasn't officially been announced, but the René Doreda versus Bo Nickal fight as match, I would rather mix these up. And I think Vettori made a lot more sense for Bo Nickal than René Doreda does, just from the sense of it. They're about the same range right now of where they stand in the UFC, but like Vettori is a bigger name than Doreda, even though Doreda is like much closer to a title shot, but also he'll sell a fight. I mean, he would have got in Bo's face. He probably would push him in the freaking fighter hotel. Like he'd do something crazy. So when you think about it, it's equal in toughness, equal in ranking, and Vettori will sell it better than Doreda. That's the matchup with it. And then you stay away from a rematch. So I really think it was really weird matchmaking.
Hell, Dolidze versus Doreda sounds good to me too.
That's what I'm saying. Just to me, I think they picked and then even like you just saw Bo against a grappler, and you got Bo against another grappler. Just seemed really weird. Vettori, I mean, he's been on the shelf for a long time, so we know what we got with him. I'm sorry, you said one of these guys left the team. Who left the team?
Oh, I should have mentioned that. Both of their cutouts below our faces say Extreme Couture.
Okay.
Vettori for most of his career was at King's MMA. He went briefly to Extreme Couture, where Dolidze has been for a while now, with his wife or baby mama. So it was Vettori who moved on, and he's prepared for this fight at American Top Team.
Okay. Which obviously that's not a bad place to go either. I mean, I've said it before about Vettori. We know the guy's a brute. I mean, he's like he's testosterone through and through. He's a pressure striker. He does his best when he's in the pocket, where he throws a lot of big hooks trying to end the fight. He has plus power, but not the power puncher that people categorize him as, because you look at him and you think he would be. He loves his left hook. He can look for a little bit too much.
What they say he is what Dricus du Plessis is.
Okay. I think they make Vettori seem like he's I'm trying to think like a Yuri Prohaska, where he just touches you and you go out.
Yeah.
And like this, but that's not really his game. He likes to work the body, which I think is the best part of his game. He avoids strikes with solid head movement. Though he'll do some shoulder rolls, which I don't like. He also drop his hands. He can grind in the clinch. He's a decent wrestler, and he doesn't get enough credit for it. He'll shoot some entries from the outside. He's more of an intelligent fighter than he gets credit for. Like, you think of him because he's like this wild man, and he says crazy stuff, and he acts like, he takes everything so personally, he wants to kill everybody, but he's not a dumb fighter. Like, he has a strategy. We go back to like the Kevin Holland fight, where you saw the best avenue of victory is like go for a takedown. If he gets on top, he's got a good top game. He's a submission threat, and he showed in the past he has a card to go 25 minutes. Now, let's say, he's huge for the weight class. I still, for a guy who's highly ranked in the UFC in the middleweight division, a guy who's headlining cards, I still don't like his striking. I still view him, like, I'm not gonna say he's one dimensional, but I mean, he got beat up on the feet pretty easily by Vettori in the first fight, and I don't know if he's made big improvements in his striking since then. Now, he does have power. I mean, we talk about like Vettori being this big, massive muscle on beach muscle kind of guy. I mean, Dolidze's even more of that.
Yeah,
he throws a lot of hard hooks. His left hook is also his best punch. I can see Momo, both of them look for that. He also throws a lot of overhand rights. He throws hard calf kicks, and he's actually one of the few fighters that check leg kicks. He will close the distance and grind in the clinch. He does well because he's so freaking strong. Mean like knees inside. He's a solid wrestler, more of a grappler. He's a very good grappler. He's a submission threat. Maybe I always go back to like that Jack Hermanson fight. He had the incredible calf slicer against Hermanson. If he's on top, good ground and pound. But cardio has always been an issue, especially I'm worried about 25 minutes. He always has a really big weight cut, and that kind of sucks the cardio. We see him kind of gas a little bit in the past. I like the line is close because Vettori's been out so long, you really don't know where it is. And I've always worried about who's been in the top 10 for long periods of time, like what's their motivation. It's hard to kind of still put that work in every day when you're the 7th best guy in the division, 8th best, and you've lost all the guys ahead of you. But sometimes it's good to take a long period out and kind of refresh the brain and heal up some injuries and change the scenery and all that. So I think there's a lot of question marks, especially on the Vettori side. And you said Vettori's the favorite, which I knew the line would be close. I thought Dolidze would be a slight favorite just because he's been a lot more active. I'm taking Vettori. I think I still see him have the advantage on the feet. I think he beats up Dolidze from distance. I trust his game plan more. I think he's faster on the feet. I think he's more technical. I think he can avoid the grappling enough in the early moments, and then or do enough that makes Dolidze work, so he's kind of burning his gas tank a little bit. And I think as the rounds go on, I think Dolidze starts to fade and Vettori doesn't. I think both fade, but not as much. I think Vettori starts pulling away the second round, the third round, the fourth round. As the rounds go on, I think he'll widen the gap. Give me Vettori by decision.
I would love to make things interesting for the listeners by bringing in some big disagreement here, but you hit all the points I really wanted to, including the one about Vettori's outside the cage IQ, you know, perhaps belying his in-cage IQ a little bit. Because, yeah, I agree. You would, based on the way he talks and acts at pressers and face-offs, you would think he fights like Kudalaba or something. Yeah. But
that's so funny we said the same exact person.
Yeah, exactly. Because Kudalaba acts that mad, but he really is that mad. Like, yeah.
But in fairness to him, he has been wrestling a lot more. He's actually been using a game plan, but all right. So like Kudalaba like 2 years ago.
Yeah. But even though Vettori's been on the shelf for a while, he is still just 31 years old. Meanwhile, I mean, Dolidze was older than that when he got to the UFC. It's why it was so hard to be excited about him. I'm like, all right, here's this 6-0 dude from Georgia who is built like a brick shit house and is already 32. Like, this will be fun while it lasts. Obviously, he has exceeded those expectations I laid on him. But the thing for me is, yeah, Vettori won the first fight kind of by outclassing Dolidze on the feet. And the variables in this one are, yeah, Vettori's been on the shelf for a year and a half, but there's also 2 more rounds. Dolidze is a guy with an iffy gas tank. And meanwhile, Vettori has fought 25 minutes in something like 4 of his last 6 fights. And while he hasn't won all of them, he didn't lose because he gassed out. You know, he lost because he wasn't quite as good as Israel Adesanya or Jared Cannonier. Here's one where, yeah, if the first 3 rounds are close and, you know, maybe Dolidze has won 2 of them, I still feel pretty good about Vettori going forward because he's turned into a good round winner. Just comes forward, throws enough volume where if neither guy distinguishes himself by scoring some huge blow or some big slam and like slides into mount, Vettori's probably winning the round because he's more active. He's having more impact. I think that dynamic just becomes more pronounced as the fight goes along, especially if Dolidze either chooses to or is forced to wrestle Vettori early. Like if Dolidze comes out just deciding to wrestle, that's one thing. Or if he just turns to trying to grapple by instinct because he's tired of getting jabbed up by Vettori's surprisingly nifty and nuanced boxing, that's just going to make him tired quicker. So yeah, my long way around to saying I see it like you do. Give me Vettori by decision here. And even if Vettori loses 1 or 2 of the first 3 rounds, it'll be real obvious who the better fighter with the greater championship upside is by the end, as Vettori is the fresher guy, wins going away, and oh, by the way, is like 5 years younger. So yeah, Vettori goes 2-0 against Dolidze. And that is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 254, Vettori versus Dolidze 2, also known as UFC Vegas 104. I've been Ben, he's been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. This was a fast, lean, and mean one by our usual standards, but however the show goes, we think we do a pretty good job of bringing you a mix of in-depth analysis and occasional running jokes that we think is pretty unique in this space. Please do like, subscribe. Neither of those things cost you a thing. They make our bosses happy. They allow us to keep bringing you this content free of charge. And drop a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. Keith picked 3 upsets. I picked 4 upsets, including probably the biggest upset I'll pick this year. If you think I'm an idiot, you wouldn't be the first. Weigh in and let me know. And if I'm wrong and all of you are right, I will give you all your flowers on the recap. You just have to come and collect them. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights in reverse order from the headliner all the way down to that first prelim, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, although that part of the show will be pretty short on Saturday. And talking with you. The live chat on the YouTube page is open that whole time. So we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.